about the issue of immigration? Can you guys touch on that?
What's that about?
The issue of immigration.
I haven't heard about that. I'll say,
You got a chuckle from the president.
that's my goal. Yes, I can retire now.
Senator Robles.
We know that that is going to be a critical issue. We don't know whether there's 5 bill, which is what public bill files tell us, or the 26 or 27 that we read in the press. From the perspective of the House Democrats, as we have discussed this, we think the place to start and the foundation on which we should be evaluating all immigration proposals is the Utah Compact. That those values and those principles lay out for us the process in which to determine what is best for this state of Utah. We know it's complicated, we know it's complex, we know there are competing interests and demands that are out there. In order to do this the best and most humane way, we think we have to start with the right values and the right principles, and we think that is contained in the Utah Compact. And you will see the House Democrats push for it.
Republican budget hawks say that there is a structural deficit of $313 million, which, as nearly as I can understand, means that now $313 million of ongoing spending is being covered with one-time money. They say that this shouldn't go on for another year or at least for long. I take it from what you've said that you're not too worried about the structural deficit, and it may not only go on to get a little bigger.
I was going to make a joke because I'm not sure I heard that. No, we are absolutely concerned about the structural deficit, but we would align ourselves and agree with the governor in the idea that we can address this a bit at a time. We don't have, the assumption being made right now with the legislature starting at 7% cuts is that we have to deal with the structural deficit all in one full swoop. That's not fiscally responsible. Those will necessitate the types of cuts that are going to drive us the opposite direction that we want to go. When we want to recover, we try and fix it all in one spot, we're going to make a turn for the worse.
Okay, I couldn't quite understand. Are you calling for more spending than the governor, or for just how much spending the governor is calling for?
I don't want to hog, I have an answer for it.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think the governor provides a great place to start. He provides a great model to go from in terms of how to deal with the structural deficit. We don't think that he does enough on public education, and so we do think there needs to be some additional prioritization there with education. So whether that translates into more spending than the governor, it's too early to tell. But we think that there's ways to put more money into public education.
How can you spend more than the governor and still reduce the structural deficit?
I think say that again, I'm sorry.
How can you spend more than the governor and still reduce the structural deficit?
Well, one, I'm not saying that we are going to spend more than that.
Okay, but it sounds as if you got your way, you might.
Well, let me interject here too. We have a rainy day fund, and the governor is only talking about using a portion of it. So there are certain ways to allocate and reprioritize this money. Now, I don't think we're in agreement with some that are suggesting that we have to close this structural imbalance in 1 year, right? This wasn't created in 1 year, and so we need to not stifle the growth that will be coming by overcutting and then later have to rehire personnel and restart programs that are being utilized right now. We have been through a process over the last few years where we have had significant budget cuts. So this isn't like we're looking for excesses or the fat or programs that have efficiencies in them. That's gone. And so now we're actually getting into cutting vital services. And as the economy is beginning to grow, that can be dangerous. Let me see if someone else has a question.
In
Yes.
previous years, you've had ideas for raising revenue, whether it be Senator Jones' tax ideas or the school boards talking about freezing the levy or bonding. Are you coming up with other ideas to bring in more revenue?
Well, I think that the proposals that have been discussed in years past should be discussed again this year, right? We haven't done them. So one of them is the rainy day money. One of them is the vendor discount. One of them is bonding, so that we're actually using the state's bonding authority where we still have leverage to do it, where construction costs are low, where interest rates are low, this is actually one of the best times to be borrowing money through bonding. You don't want to borrow when rates are high and costs are high. And so as it is a bridge to growth for the future, and as it is a vehicle of financing, that is something that we should be looking at. And so I was glad to hear in public forum Representative D say we may well look at that as an option. One of the other avenues we should at least be considering is raising the gasoline tax slightly. Again, it has the added benefit of hopefully encouraging carpooling and mass transit, which reduces the carbon emissions, which cleans up our air. You know, Senator Morgan talked about our community and where we are falling behind. Let me tell you, we are having way too many poor air quality days. We are falling behind in our environmental stewardship, particularly as to air. And so we need to figure out a way to reduce that, especially in the winter months when it's so prevalent. So I guess what I want to say in sum is there are several vehicles and several different proposals we should at least be considering as we look to grow out of this budget problem.
So what it sounds like is you're saying you're okay with creating a deficit as long as it can be covered in the coming years. Is there a limit to how much of that?
Okay, well, let me just stop you. We're not okay with creating a deficit. We're in a deficit, okay? And it isn't created by anybody. It's the nature of what services exist in our state government. So should we try to close it? Yes, because that's the responsible thing to do. But have we been running deficits, which happens year over year because projections don't come into budget? Yes. So we just have to do the best we can. But all I'm saying is if we cut too far to make this work in 1 year, then it's going to take us a number of years to get back to providing the vital services that people need. Let me remind you, just 2 short years ago, and even last year, we had this community very frustrated about the lines that were occurring at the DMV. One of the things we realized is that was understaffed and they were undertrained. So we corrected that. So, you know, I think we can't be too quick to take from state government when there has been so much already taken out of it and recognize that it can still provide the services that people need. When I was walking door to door, I can tell you people were telling me, don't raise my taxes. I never heard that once. What they said to me was, fix public education. And we have to recognize that that's a problem. And I don't know that it can be done simply with the money we have unless we prioritize or unless we find a way to build new opportunities there.
There are numbers floating around that Medicaid has doubled in the past 10 years or something like that, and it is on track to double in the next 10 years. I take it that your position is that's just going to happen. We're going to have to spend more for social services, spend more to help poor people get medical care, and doubling Medicaid, not Medicare, excuse me, doubling Medicaid is just see it coming and get ready.
First you have to understand that Medicaid and what ails Medicaid is no different than our general health care system. And so the steps that we're taking as a legislature to fix health care within the state is going to have huge impacts on Medicaid. And you also have to further understand that who Medicaid serves primarily are the individuals and families, people with disabilities, the aged and elderly, that the private insurance is not going to touch. And so there is a extra cost pressure there within Medicaid. And we also have to further understand that investing in healthcare, investing in Medicaid saves money. So when you talk about the need to reduce the structural deficit, absolutely, Senator Romero said, but if we make that the primary goal and we take the types of cuts to our human infrastructure, education, higher and public health care, we're going to increase that deficit because there's going to be a lot of cost shifting that happens, not just out in the community, but within the government as well. So this isn't just about, you know, the Pollyanna Democrats or the bleeding hearts standing up and saying, we need to provide these services because we believe in them, that they're humane. Absolutely, we believe in them, that they're humane. But they're also the fiscally responsible thing to do for the long-term financial status of this state of Utah.
Some of the cuts that are being proposed are not common sense solutions. These are primarily cuts to children and prevention. When we look at some of the potential cuts to, for instance, nutrition and obesity, and a whole long list of other things in some of the long-term care waivers, and these kinds of issues, those are services that help people stay in their homes in a lot less cost than if they go into institutionalized care. So we need to look at the prevention piece and what prevents disease, what prevents people from having to go into a place where maybe they don't necessarily want to go into. We need to look at common sense solutions, and it is common sense to look at prevention, and that's really what we need to look at.
Anyone else? Well, let me thank you again for being here. Let me encourage the press to cover the Democratic response to the State of the State. Again, this goes into making sure the community knows that there is a different voice, and we appreciate you covering that different voice. I want to thank our colleagues for taking the time to have committee meetings, and again, we encourage you to participate with us next week, Tuesday on the noon hour. If there's something obviously that comes up that we think needs more immediate attention, we will be here for that, but we want to know that we will be discussing bills and specific issues that come up during the course of the week on those Tuesdays' availability. Thank you very much.